Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's wonderful. 130 people, which is a fantastic one for our first in the seminar series of going forward as church. One of the things that we've been noticing on the Ministers' Forum is that, and on various other forums, is that there's a lot of conversation about how do we do church when we go back? And how are we going to live stream? How are we going to manage this in-person worship and people at home when we're only allowed a certain number? And these are big questions, but they're actually questions that are much bigger than buying some cable and a camera and plugging it into the internet, because there are some fundamental questions that we want to raise and for you to think about. Because one of the most important things is whether you actually want to stream or not. You see, streaming over this last year has become a bit like a boys' brigade company and a women's guild back in the day, that in order to be a proper Church of Scotland parish church, you had to have both. And now we're adding live streaming onto that. But the bottom line is we need to think about why we live stream and whether it's right for our own individual context. For some churches, it will be right. For others, it might not be right. But how do we collaborate? How do we think about what we're doing? And what are the fundamental questions that comes when it comes to asking about why we live stream? What's the mission? How does it best serve us in what we're doing, worshipfully, missionally in our community? I know Neil wants to share a little bit about that as well, and Jeremy. But just before we go any further, Jeremy, can you maybe share a little bit about what you do live streaming wise? I know you've got a number of different parishes where you are as well.
Yeah, so I have 6 churches in my little patch. None of them has broadband of any sort. 2 of them have some kind of sound system. One works okay, one really doesn't. And at the beginning, I guess we were finding our way like everybody else. But actually, I started live streaming the first weekend of lockdown just because it seemed the right thing to do to have some kind of continuity. And when we were in a position where we could go back into church, one of the things we found was, well, we couldn't live stream reliably from every church. So we thought, okay, we'll record things live and then upload them as live. But actually, we ended up saying, actually, we'll always have something live now. So we'll always have a live stream, even when we have services in particular churches, and we'll always promote both. And we'll see what happens. And so far, it's going well. But there's a certain discipline of routine and demand that I guess we're learning a year in.
Yeah. I think, yeah, I share that. And, we have been live streaming in our church in Lanark for the last 10 years. We've just had our 10th anniversary. And some of the early years were on very ropey technology that almost allowed you to see a picture. But we got there and we've come through that into full HD. What could be better than seeing me in HD on a Sunday morning on a 55-inch television on your wall? But one of the things that I'm now struggling with is whether going back into church next month, whether sticking our live stream on, which is the easiest thing in the world for us to do, is the right thing. Because we've been having conversations with people. It's been much more kind of interactive, or at least sofa watching, rather than me standing up in the front of a church and then watching in on it. So I think there are challenges there. And I know Neil has, through Sanctus Media, done an awful lot over the last number of years, including help to facilitate one of our online churches, Sanctuary First. But Neil, live streaming, what is it all about?
Um, I guess it's a way of extending the reach of your congregation's ministry into the homes or the lives of others who can't get to your building. I've been involved in live streaming since the pre-COVID times, which of course seems like decades ago, but was only a year ago. And for congregations that were interested in live streaming Before then, it was about extending their ministry. And I think of two terms. I think of church online and online church, where online church is perhaps something akin to Sanctuary First or St. Pixels or names like that from the past, where it's an online community that doesn't have a bricks and mortar base, and they're meeting online and they wholly exist online. Whereas church online is just an online expression of a church that already does many things in its parish already. This is just another extension to that. So for me, live streaming is a missional opportunity. It's outreach. Of course, we tend to think of it primarily in worship, and indeed in the last year, that's probably been its main key point. It's been a worship enabler, but it is much more than that. But it's a way to reach out, to reach those elderly, infirm, shift workers, frazzled parents, holiday makers, the curious, former locals who've moved away, tourists, schools, weddings, funerals, anyone and everyone. And for enterprising churches that realise that actually a lot of their audience is now online. The churches will be searched for no longer in the yellow pages or in the social section of the newspaper, but in fact people are going to Google to find churches and congregations and what is this God thing all about. And live streaming is a missional tool to do that. What it's not is television. What it shouldn't be, rather, more accurately, is television, where you are watching other people worship. And I think the skill and the care and the diligence that needs to happen with live streaming is that it should be a worshipful experience for those who are at a distance, looking at a screen. And that's tricky. I think that requires skills and perhaps new practices, new vocabulary, new language, new ways of reaching out and talking to people, perhaps different skills within the mix in your congregation to reach out online and to relate online, so that the folks who are watching in are not viewers, but they are congregants. And what will it take for you to get to a place to say, we have congregants who sit in pews and we have congregants who are watching online, and they are no different in terms of people, but we just have to employ different techniques in communicating with them and relating to them. So, in the Church of Scotland world, how will you have an internet elder? Whose role it is, as well as those who have districts and physical areas or the postal district, who will have responsibility for cultivating the relationships with your congregants who are online. Really deep questions, but wonderful. It's a rich minefield out there. It's not a mine. It's a rich field out there, a harvest field out there. But it will take effort. It will take energy, and I think I probably want to say at this stage as a warning to everybody, if you think it's just putting cameras in and pressing broadcast and walking away, then I'm going to suggest there's a bit more thinking to do. But we've got more news on that a wee bit later on.
Absolutely. And I think it is something that's really important that we actually get it right. And one of the worst things I think we could do is rush into this and have 500 churches in the next month because we're opening and restrictions are relaxing a little bit, thinking, right, we need to do something and we need to put cameras up in every church. The bottom line is, you've not been broadcasting, a lot of you, from your churches. You've been broadcasting from here, from your living room or your study or your garden. And that can still continue. Now, there is a resourcing issue around that, because if you are wanting to keep going with the broadcasting, what else are you going to lay down? And what else are you going to give yourself permission to lay down and say that this is important in your ministry, this is important in your mission? If you have been doing church online, then if you want to continue it, it doesn't necessarily mean sticking a camera up in front of you in church. It may well be providing something different or cultivating, as Neil said, those different relationships. Because putting a camera up in church has done it, scratched the itch for a lot of people in our place for some years. But now they're wanting more in terms of conversational content. They're wanting more in terms of meditative content. And you can't necessarily do that from a big church building where you're looking at things. And I think certainly in a Church of Scotland context, the both and may be something we need to look at. But if you're concerned about losing members when you go back to the in-person and not having enough, perhaps we need to start shifting our thinking into what we provide, and not thinking that we broadcast what we're doing in the building, but we actually provide something that is really high quality, really important, and really helpful going forward. And there are ways you can do that. There are ways you can do it easily using the cameras that we use are mostly our phones, because I don't have big fancy cameras like Neil does. But if you've got big fancy cameras like Neil, that's great. I want to be your friend. But you can do things, but there are some costs. External microphones that are good quality, tripods or gimbals that you need to look at. There are things that you can look at. And I do think we maybe want to move on to what might be kind of possible within this. And Jeremy has got some solutions for us. We've obviously in Greyfriars been helping out with phone lines, audio reflections that people can use, and we're happy to continue to do that for people. There are hardwired solutions that you need lots of permission for that will come and that you can get, and we're going to introduce you a little bit to that process. But there are also some processes that allow you to perhaps do things in a much more portable and mobile way. That means that you can do things in a building, but also take them beyond that building. And Jeremy, can we kind of pass to you for some of the stuff that you've been looking at and thinking about as well?
Sure, thank you. And so I wear a number of different hats. My vicaring is half time, and the other half time I divide between a number of different projects. And two of those are this church and Faith Online. So I'm an advisor to Faith Online, and I'm a co-principal with this church. And they're both doing different things, but in the same broad space. And I really appreciate that Bryan is welcoming someone who, in some ways, we're offering. I don't think competing visions, but sometimes we are offering alternative solutions or components of solutions, and that's inevitable. I really want to encourage everybody to be thinking, if we're all collaborating and starting from mission first, the fact that we have different choices that we can make is a good thing. So I'll talk about those two separately because they're very different. This church is all about websites, and I guess for some people, one of the questions is, well, isn't the web sort of over? looking around the room, perhaps you're already on YouTube and Facebook and Snapchat and TikTok and IM2. Who's on IM2 here? Raise a hand if you're on. Okay, there is no IM2. I made that up. That's all that IM2 stands for, but probably there'll be an IM2 along any time now. There are all these very intimate channels, the WhatsApps, indeed Zoom in a sense. And it's very easy to neglect the world of simple websites. And it's easy to just think, well, either it doesn't matter now, or it's just for us. And now is a great time to be remembering that the whole point of the website is getting found by the people you want to connect with, who at the moment of all times are asking questions they've never asked before. And the place they're going is online. So thinking about a website as a place where people can discover information they want and get answers quickly, and just get the basics covered really well, have something which is maintained easily, which shows that your church is made of people as well as buildings and events, giving that sort of familiarity. That's for some churches, that's just too much of a stretch, because there's a website that either somebody knocked up a while back for nothing and it doesn't matter, or else there's something you're incredibly attached to that costs lots of time and effort, but you know it doesn't really work. So with this church, we're trying to help lots and lots of churches solve that problem. So this church is a platform WordPress, which most people are aware of, but we add in a whole lot of extra bits and pieces and plugins so that cohorts of people starting to make a website work together. We pull together a website over 8 weeks. And for some people, 8 weeks for a website, that's a crazy long time. But trust me, most of the people that I talk to say we've been arguing for years about how to sort out a website. So we go through very steadily and systematically. We do that together as a learning group, and everybody kind of graduates together using the same platform, using custom videos. We have a weekly live session where people can ask and answer questions, and we record that so they can engage with it online as well, because that's part of practicing what we preach. And the big barrier we wanted to take away, it's a non-profit project, was affordability. So it costs all of £22.50 every year for the hosting and £30 to join in the first place, which obviously none of that really covers the full costs, but that's fine. It's a missional project, and we want to bless people with it, and the more the better. But I do, even in spite of the fact that it is missional and sacrificial and so on, I do have a little bit of an offer. So if you go to this church website and click the big friendly sign up button and put all the information in there, if you put COS5, Church of Scotland 5, anytime in the next month or so, you'll get £5 off that 30. So it would be really nice to work with a bunch of people. If you're tearing your hair out about your website and you want to share that task of administration, make it simple, make it possible for everybody to make use of it, and make it do the job it's probably meant to do, which is help people find you, engage with you, ask the questions they want to ask of you, and begin that journey to other interactive events that you have, then this church is the place. So I switch hat, and I'm an advisor to Faith Online, and Faith Online, I think, is a different story, very much formed in the age of streaming. The team that came together about a year ago, led by Andre, just had this vision that said, when you look at all of this stuff churches are trying to do, and I totally take Neil's point, it's very helpful thinking about the distinction between online church, which was the thing, and it exists, and it has existed, and it's been experimented, and then there's church online. Well, the process of putting everything together, it can kind of feel like there are two things you can do when you want to take your church online. And one of those is somebody starts pointing, there's wool, there's knitting needles, go and make the gospel clothing that will take you online. And you go, well, is there a pattern? Someone hands you a pattern, and before you know it, you've made a hoodie with no arms, and people are panicking. And the other thing you can find is boiler suits. There's one size fits all, designed for the communities that YouTube is particularly designed for, and the commercials of that, and Facebook, and all these other worlds in which there's an entire infrastructure. It doesn't fit church very well. Again, to take Neil's point up, that broadcasting out to people, and then in some cases bringing those people back to offers and commercial things and all of that stuff, that's what all of that has been built around. And as church, we're trying to fit away around the edges. So the Faith Online vision of that was to say, actually, can we give people a off-the-shelf option where there are fewer, more meaningful choices, and where you get to put together the bits you want? So the phone lines, the YouTube streaming, custom stuff, sharing up to 10 people, accessing that. So if somebody might be recording a prayer for the day, you select some hymns and other things people can access through the phone line side, and all of the service booking, managing in-person events, and so on. It's all kind of done in one place. And I was going to show you something. I could show you my own Faith Online console, but in a way that almost misses the point. The Faith Online idea is that there's a little bit of simple administrative work to do, but then everything just kind of works. And rather than show you anything, my suggestion would be there's a free trial available, and indeed there's a long-term free plan. So if you want to try out the whole process and experience what it's like, and is this for me, that's the way of going and checking how to do that. The vision for Faith Online is bigger than what's built so far, which is around, as I say, phone lines and web and streaming and event management and other bits and pieces. It will grow over time. Donations is the next thing, which we'll see. I run the forum so that churches that want to share resources, want to share stories, want to work together, want to help direct the feature development in Faith Online, we do that in a forum which is just about to be visible to the world in the next not too many days. So that's really exciting, and again, it's a great kind of community. Again, there's kind of an offer in there as well. If you sign up and let me know, so email me at jeremy@faith.online. If you sign up for the free trial, let me know your phone number. Then in about a month's time, I do have a little offer that you might find exciting. It has one string attached, but anyway, you'll have to email me to find out both what the offer is and what the string is. Thanks, Bryan.
Excellent, thank you. And in terms of Sanctus Media, Neil, which obviously you've been involved in for many years, also works in the kind of website side of things as well. But I know you've worked with congregations and presbyteries and groups like that. What sort of things can people do through kind of Sanctus and what you offer?
Well, we've in some ways we've had to change our approach a little since the COVID pandemic. We don't sell kit and infrastructure. There's plenty of people. You can even go to Amazon to buy cameras and things. We don't physically install things. I don't do ladders or boiler suits under the floor. But there are people who do that around Scotland and indeed I dare say the UK. Where we like to get involved is our expertise is that we speak church. And that as congregations or presbyteries or whatever engage in live streaming, sure, let's help them with advising what the right kit to get in the right place is. But actually, that's just a money exercise. You pay the money, and on day one, all your shiny new toys are installed. It's now 10:59 a.m. on a Sunday morning. You're about to press broadcast, and what happens? For the remaining 52 weeks of this year and the next year and the next year, or 104 if you're doing 2 a day, what do you do with that? How do you make it an engaging tool? You remember my maxim from earlier on, this is not television, it's worship. So how do we get people feeling that they're congregants? How do we work with worship leaders, with the tech operators, in order to provide a meaningful experience? And then how do we help a congregation build relationships? And that involves talking and communicating with people. And that won't happen necessarily camera to camera, although we have seen that in Zoom, which was an unexpected ramp up for many people. And indeed, we need to be very careful that people who've been very used to contributing to worship over the last year, when we get back to in-person worship, we'll be back to the pews, shut up, sit down and listen, where they've been so used to contributing. And we need to watch that discontinuity when it comes. But helping congregations through those, whether that's training on a tech point of view, or whether that's having conversations with mission teams about how best now to move forward with this. Conversations around, you maybe, dear congregation, you spend 50 quid a week putting an advert in your local paper. You need to redirect that 50 quid to Facebook advertising, to Google advertising if you want to be found. People won't walk past your website the same way they walk past your building on the high street. And so marketing and promotion needs to be part of that. And then people in your financial board will ask, how do we know it's working? How do we know it's a success? So what are success criteria? How would we measure that? And you're probably getting the measure of me already that I'm not interested in clicks and hits on your website. I would be interested, however, in the stories of lives that have been changed by folks who have come across your congregation because they're tuning in to the website, or folks who are members of your congregation who haven't been able to join you in worship for 15 years for one reason or another and are now watching in regularly, or folks who are contributing financially to the life and witness of your church, or whatever the stories might be. And one hearty story is worth 1,000 Facebook clicks and Facebook likes. And so those are the kind of things we like to help churches explore. Our challenge has been in the last year, of course, that in the pre-COVID times, that's just about being manageable for our wee company. But, in the last year, lots of people have wanted to have conversations like this, and we can't do it on a one-by-one basis, which is why things like this are so much better. We maybe can't give individual advice to everybody, but being able to give generic conversations about things to think about, things to watch out for, things to adopt, things to embrace, or indeed just cultivating and fostering conversations are a way to much more rapidly develop in this area. None of us saw the rapid explosion of this a year ago, and and things like Zoom are a way for us to be able to tell the one story to many people all at once, and we'll be offering something a wee bit later on that I hope will scratch the itch that many folks have, and how do we move forward. You're probably realizing already that there is so much to live streaming that we're not going to get through this all in this 1 hour. You've not even seen the pictures of a camera yet, and some of you are going to be disappointed that there's no cables here, there's no tech, because actually engaging in live streaming isn't a knee-jerk reaction to the churches being closed necessarily, but in fact should be part and parcel of the mission, outreach and worship of a church. And if you go around it that way, I think for whatever investment you put in place, some of that will be financial, most of that will be people, and you all know that people are the hardest resource in any congregation, because you can't throw money at people in your congregation. Well, you can, but that's that's not how it works. And having the kit, but having the people with the right attitude, ethos, drive, and enthusiasm is the key. And that just takes a little bit of time to cultivate, to set into place. And we hope that by the end of this hour, we'll be able to put in place a plan that will take you through all of those steps.
And I think, Neil, time is really important, because we've all learned over this last year, if you've been putting services together, that the days of picking your hymns, writing your sermon and going and preaching are gone. It now takes an awful lot longer to make content, to edit content, to put things together, and we don't want to lose that either, because some of these things are really important. In fact, in my own church, some of those outdoor things, some of those conversations, some of those meditations have been some of the most powerfully and best understood in the whole year that we've been doing this, and it's something I don't want to lose. And I think Roddy put something in the chat about, we need to understand how to create that content and what works, how to fill a space online as well, where it's not just sitting and pressing record. And I think that's going to be really important over the months that lie ahead. Going forward as a church technologically, we would love it if it was as simple as go and buy some cameras, stick them in, and away you go. But it's really not. The technology is only one part of it. It's about what we do with that. And it's about how we invest in that in terms of people, in terms of finance, in terms of the mission and energy of the church as well. What we are going to do in saying that, though, we are about to look at a few options that are there, because I think that's important just now. And it may well be, and I've seen some ideas in the chat, that groups of congregations come together to actually share these things. I would love to see 4 or 5 creative hubs around Scotland that congregations could actually use as a base for good quality recording, that they can use it. They can bring their youth group in and present something. They can record some content, that there are people there able to do that. And I know it's something that I'm kind of kicking about in my mind at the moment, that there could be a plan for something like that. But in the meantime, when we're not in that land of wonder, there are some things that we can do. And I'm just going to share a couple of things. Many of you already have taken advantage of a phone line that you're able to record. People phone in and they can get your service, if it's YouTube Live or a recording or a reflection during the week. and this is there, and it costs £5 a month to do that. There are, when you get into cameras, we were talking about not necessarily having to have the need to actually put things down in cables. You have some very simple things. You have things like, or that look simple but technologically are really quite important. You have a Mevo camera that allows you to directly stream from that camera as well. And actually, whilst you can buy the camera on its own, Faith Online also have an in-the-box kit that you can get the cameras and all the lights, microphones, and everything that you need to start broadcasting for under £1,000. And actually, one of the big things I've had in my mind over the last few months is when we buy a new microphone and we buy a good quality microphone, and people say, but how can you spend £200 on a microphone? Well, to make the content sound good, can't do anything about the face, but I can do something about the voice. But actually, we have talked so much over the years about how many hymn books we buy at 20 quid a throw, or whatever we do in churches, and we're forgetting that this is now a space that we have to inhabit as church, and that also means providing funding and resourcing for that as well, whether that's individually as churches or collaboratively as well. One of the other things that has, I'm just trying to find it on my screen, which has exploded in popularity, is the little thing called, from Blackmagic, called the Atem Mini. These are phenomenal little bits of kit, and I know some churches have this already. I think Jonathan's got one, John Orr's got one. In fact, I think churches caused a global shortage of these not that long ago, and they had to build more. They are fantastic bits of kit, and what is great about them is you don't need to set up a permanent structure or rig. It's a few buttons, some cameras, and you're there. There are, of course, then the more elaborative or elaborate installations where we have cameras in places, we have wiring, we have different things that might need or that will need permission from the general trustees to do that. And I want to introduce you to one of our advisors in this, and John Turner. I'm going to bring John in. John is our AV advisor. Welcome, John, and thanks for being here. John will be the person who will come out and either virtually or in person actually come and see you and visit you. John, you've been doing a lot of visits over these last couple of years, advising churches on what they can do. What's your take on all this at the moment, and how we kind of are moving forward as churches, and what might be the best way to start in all this journey?
There's quite a number of strands to that, Brian. I think in the first instance, before COVID, where a lot of especially the bigger churches actually had camera installations, and they had a technical team that could actually operate some very, very sophisticated setups in some places. They've adopted the web streaming very, very easily by effectively just adding a box onto the end and plugging it into the internet. So that paradigm, which has been accepted by the congregations in terms of streaming their own services onto their own internal screens, but there aren't all that many of them who have done that. I think one of the biggest the biggest question I've been asked over the past 12 months is about web streaming, and I think we've had hundreds, certainly dozens of requests from very small congregations, rural congregations, up to very, very large congregations who have been wanting to adopt screen technologies as well. So I think integrating web streaming with churches that are embracing screen technologies for CH4 words for weddings, maybe not funerals per se, but I think these are the guys who have the technical teams available, certainly within the youth churches, which is what I try to get them involved in the creative side of that. Cameras are cameras. Yeah, you can buy a Logitech webcam, stick it in your USB port in your laptop, and basically go anywhere very, very cheaply, under 100 quid. Some of the bigger churches have got SDI cameras, NDI cameras. Everything is gigabit and Ethernet based. Vision mixers, yeah, the A10 Mini Pro, they sold out. They had to remanufacture a whole stack of them. And there's not really that many alternatives in the marketplace out there that replaces that. There are a few. But I think one of the interesting things that I've found over the past 12 months is the amount of churches that want to embrace web streaming which do not have internet connectivity.
Yeah.
And I think that, especially for the rural congregations, is quite a challenge, especially when the government keep on promising that everybody on the planet is going to be connected by fibre broadband tomorrow. And yet some of the rural places, surprisingly, the Highlands and Islands are very well served for fibre broadband, ironically. But there are places in the middle of Fife, in the middle of the Lothians, in the middle of the Highlands that are just never going to get broadband any decade soon. The 4G, 5G wireless routers quite commonly available now, anything from about 80 quid to quite a few hundred quid. My son-in-law actually is a development engineer for Adobe, and he's got a Huawei. They live in a converted church down in Paisley, which has got 3 foot thick walls, and he gets 320 megabit per second download and 180 megabit per second upload from a box at a suitably conveniently placed window within the church. So these technologies are now becoming available. They're becoming robust. They're becoming cheaper. Yeah, and the shift from, what a lot of what I'm seeing, shift from the vestry back into the churches as they open, it is a big shift in terms of the presentation that people will begin to expect on web streaming. And I think the team that you got there are quite right. I think it's the presentation of how do we get the message, the mission, the worship to be still in the church setting as opposed to in a television setting. Churches are churches, they're not television studios. One of the biggest things that I discuss with people is that if you take the leaf out of the evangelicals and the Baptists from America and flip on your Skybox on a Sunday morning, then you get dozens of God channels available so you can actually watch. Now that's a certain thing. But what I also warn people is that don't take that as read. It's not actually the real world that we live in. And it's cheaper for the evangelicals and the Baptists to throw $1 million at a television broadcast studio because their churches have got 10,000 people on a Sunday morning. It's cheaper for them to invest $1 million in a broadcast studio than it is to go next door, buy the land and build another church for another 10,000 people. So that's a completely different shift in what people actually perceive as mission and worship on television. Going forward, I have also warned a lot of people that if they want to spend a load of money on this, it is a reactive, very short-term fix. And if they really want to dip a toe in the water, then they should invest small amounts of money and easy to operate, very low-key technology, dip the toe in the water and find out what kind of audiences and congregants are actually getting online without then throwing a whole load of money at it to go online, because people want a bang for their buck. And if you spend 10 grand on a video streaming system, is it going to be in the bin this time next year when people actually haven't embraced that?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one, John, and what happens when we do return to whatever normal is, and when the enthusiasm goes. And I think that's where the discussion changes, as you rightly say, and Neil said, from tech to content.
Yes,
and what you can do. And you know, I think what I've really appreciated from what you've said is that there is a willingness within the general trustees to look at churches and to have you advise churches, but actually that might not be the best solution for a congregation to put wires everywhere. It might well be that a portable solution that they can take elsewhere and have their own recording studio somewhere else that they could actually produce might actually be the way ahead. So John, thank you, because I think that's really important that folks hear from you and see you as our advisor on this for the general trustees. And please do, if you are looking at putting in an AV install, then contact general trustees. Judith Roebuck would be your person, and I know Judith's on the call as well, and she's able to put you in touch with John to offer advice and to get those permissions as well.
Can I just say one thing,
please?
Just from, again, picking up from what both Jeremy and Neil have said there, it's a lot of people haven't quite grasped the time that people have got to actually spend physically. I think, Jeremy, you touched on it when you said it's gone from, you know, taking a few notes to put a sermon together, and, you know, a hymn board with a hymn number on it. It's gone from there to, you know, digital transcriptions, spending time with media, thinking about content. And a lot of, you know, with the greatest respect, elderly ministers and elderly Kirk sessions neither have the time available nor the wherewithal and knowledge base to actually do that. And I think the congregations that have actually embraced this are the congregations that have got very creative teams who have got the time and energy to spend on doing this. So that's another big thing that people have got to be well aware of going forward.
Yeah, and I think there was a question there from Dave about a list of AV install companies, and whilst John will never recommend one over the other for good commercial reasons, but he's very good, John, at telling you what has worked well in some churches and what might not have worked well in other churches. If you just listen to what John says and read between the lines, you'll do well. But if you contact Judith Roebuck, she'll be able to supply you with those details. And there are companies local to you perhaps that are used to it, and not every AV company is used to doing AV installs in churches, and that's a very different discipline. I mean, John and I have been out on a number of visits together in Carter, and that is one of the big challenges, isn't it, John, getting a company that understands church and how we do things.
Well, I think that the other thing that you just touched on there, Brian, and interestingly, a lot of people won't realise this, that one of my other roles within the Carter and General Trustees is to be the middleman between litigation between congregations and AV companies. And there have been a surprising number of cases that I've actually had to mediate in. We do have a list of surprisingly about 30 AV companies within Scotland, going from Lerwick right down to the borders. And we're finding out more each day as we reach further out into the Highlands and Islands and more into the rural communities. And yes, Judith and I can supply a list of these. These are in no way, shape or form approved by the General Trustees or the Carter Committee, but we know that they have all got very, very good and solid experience within houses of worship, generally speaking, and that's not just the Church of Scotland, talking about general houses of worship. So that list is available, and it grows every day and every week.
Right. And I think in terms of, somebody's asked about what the permissions are required. So if you want to put any fixed thing in a church, and any kind of cabling or cameras, or put them, attach them to anything, then you need to go through Carta for advice. And you also then need permission from your presbytery and from the general trustees, who are the people who will grant authority for you to do that work. Now, it doesn't take that long, especially if you've spoken to John and taken on his advice as well. And I know that the general trustees are really trying to work very hard at putting these things through. And yes, Carta has been disbanded, but Judith, who worked for Carta, and Fiona are both now part of the general trustees. And it's now Art and Architecture rather than the Committee on Art and Architecture. And so if you contact Judith, she'll be able to give you all the details and how you get those permissions and what you do. But John, thank you. That's been really, really helpful. And I hope that lots of people now have heard from you, have seen you, and no doubt you'll be kept very busy over the next few months.
Bring it on. That's all.
Oh, there you go. There's a challenge for him. Perfect. Thanks, John. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. No problem at all. Thanks, Brian.
There are challenges in terms of broadband 4G. There are things about live stream and recording. Where do you draw the line and what do you do? But I think the biggest thing that we've got to look at is why we do the technology and what that means for us. And over the next few weeks, we are delighted to be able to let you know that we are, the three of us are about to launch something that might be of help to people. We are looking at launching Church Tech Chat. And if you go to that website and put in your details, we are looking at continuing that chat. Look at those three very handsome people down at the bottom. I tell you, I mean, it looks good. I mean, Neil looks like he's selling for an X catalogue there, but I'm not saying what I look like, but there you go. But churchtechchat.org. And the reason that we've done that is because we want to take this discussion about mission and why we do things a little bit further. And so, Neil, do you want to maybe mention what we're thinking about in terms of taking it further?
Yes, and one of the two of you have a slide ready.
I have.
Which has the summary of this. You've realised, folks, that we can't do this justice in only 1 hour session, and so we're expanding it out to 6 sessions over the next 6 or so weeks, to cover as much as we can, recognising that we just can't do it in one fell swoop. So week 1, titled "So You Want to Live Stream? Why do you want to do it? Who will do it? When will you do it? To whom will you live stream? How will you live stream? And what are all the initial setup phases that you need to get your ducks in a row? And then how to take, in the Church of Scotland context, how to take your Kirk session and your congregation with you on the journey, so that when the end time comes, everything is ready. Some of you may already have discovered that some people are resistant to the fact they're going to be on television, quote unquote. But that's not the reality, of course, as to what happens. So how do you tell and sell the story? And that's going to be week 1. Week 2 is again in the why and the wherefore phase, worship and mission. How will live streaming enhance, extend, and engage your ministry activities? I spoke to one congregation a year or 2 back about their live streaming, and said, well, how does it fit in with your mission strategy? And they said, oh, actually, I'm not sure we have a mission strategy. And to their credit, they went, look, Neil, we're going to call you back in 6 months. And they did. And to their credit, they went away, they had a look at a full mission strategy, in the traditional sense, quote unquote, in the physical world, but also in the online sense. And when I went back 6 months later, I said, okay, here's our mission strategy. Here is where our internet and online activities fit in. And it's not just live streaming. There's social media engagement, there's online relationships, there's study groups, there's email lists, there's newsletters, there's a whole raft to that. Week 3, the tech, end to end. Input to output, cameras, microphones, lights, cables, ATEMs, whatever, all that bit is going to be in week 3. Week 4, online relationships. You've heard me from the very beginning. This is not just telly, this is not just TV. How do we engage with those who we are ministering to online? Chat, group work, email, replays, equality, inclusivity. Getting the stories, not the clicks, measuring success, and cultivating online relationship. Week 5 is putting it all together, practicing, watching others do it. What are techniques? There'll be camera techniques, there'll be vocal techniques, there'll be communication skills, there'll be programming. Would you think about rejigging your service order if it meant it worked better online? Wow, big thoughts. So how would we put all that together end to end? And then week 6, this is just the beginning. All this might lead up to the day when you have kit installed, you broadcast, and then you realise actually this is just the start. Marketing, promotion, church is more than just worship. What skills and training do we need to put in place, both for our technology teams, for our relationship teams, but also our worship leaders and our pastors and ministers? How do we build community online? How do we integrate in-person and online communities together? Because they might be separate for a while. Do they remain separate? Can they be together? How might that circle be squared? And then peppered amidst all of that will be little slots. So in week 1, it'll be a small slot on a recap from the General Trustees and the new Carta Art and Architecture permissions and where does Presbytery and the General Trustees fit into that. Session 2 will have a side topic on safeguarding, the legals, GDPR, data protection, who can be on what screen. Week 3 we'll touch on copyright, licensing, who do we need to pay, what songs can we play, and so on. Week 4, online resources. You're not alone, and you don't have to use all the materials that you have in yourself. Many of you have discovered many organisations online that do pictures, they've got videos you can play, songs you can download. Where can you get all of these? Week 5, in the putting it all together week, we'll have some case studies. So let's hear from congregations who are already doing this. What have they learned? What have been their high points and their low points? And then week 6 would be commission, encouragement, and go forth. And see you online would be the side session there. So those are the 6 weeks. And it might be that some of you join us for all 6 weeks. It might be that you dip in and out. You might realise, actually, I'm not the person who needs to go to the tech one, but this person in my congregation should see it. I'm going to give them the link for week 3. But I want my session clerk to see week 2 about safeguarding, legals and GDPR. My data protection officer, they should watch week 2. So it could be dip in and dip out, although some of you will be with us for the whole journey. It takes 6 weeks. We can't do it in an hour. We really can't. And I think you're probably beginning to appreciate that just now. But we hope it's still short and sharp enough to get you moving as quickly as we can. And we're not going to do this 6 weeks over 6 months. We're going to do our very best to make it 6 weeks consecutively, one after the other. The sign up page will be in chat. That was the page that Bryan showed you earlier on, where you can sign up to join. Pass that link and share it around.
Yep, thanks, Neil. And I think one of the other things that Elspeth's just put in the chat is about the Adapt and Thrive process, and that's the funding from the Scottish Government about buildings and organisations that perhaps need to change to develop in a post-COVID world. The good news is that deadline has been extended to the 30th of June, which is why we want to do this type of thing over the next couple of months to allow people to do that. It should be said, I spoke to Judith Roebuck in General Trustees yesterday, and you don't need final permission in order to apply for the funding. But what you have to be aware of is that if you get the funding, it is not entirely necessary that you will then automatically get the permission from the General Trustees. So these two things have to work hand in hand, and make sure that you get advice so that you're not applying for an amount of money that is really low compared to what you're actually going to need to spend to put in a system that folks can make use of. So the Adapt and Thrive is there, and we're going to be looking at funding as well. So we don't have, as Neil said, we don't have set dates in. We're going to wait and see who signs up and what we can do. But trust me, for those worried, as a minister, Holy Week and Easter and the week after, where we're all lying in a darkened room somewhere, shall not feature in those 6 weeks. So we're fairly certain of that, so don't worry about it. Now, we're aware that that is 1 o'clock. We've used our allotted hour, and the Zoom fairy might come and beat us if we don't stop. However, what we are going to do is throw to Jonathan, and if you want to stay on for a little question and answer thing, you're more than welcome to do that. And the very first one there from Jeff Redmayne, have there been any success stories of funding from Adapt and Thrive? And the answer is yes. There have been for this very thing. So churches are eligible, and Church Tech is eligible, which is fantastic news. Jonathan, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Brian, and thank you very much to everyone who has contributed today, to Neil and to Jeremy. It's been wonderful to hear your insight into this minefield that we have been navigating, particularly through the Ministers' Discussion Forum, where we've had umpteen questions because everyone has had this on their mind. Looking back, a lot of the questions, Brian, you've been sort of picking a lot of them up as we go along, so I'm just looking through to see if there's anything in particular that sticks out for anybody. I'm just looking here to see if anyone has added anything recently. I suppose a lot of the questions that are being asked are going to be addressed during the Church Tech Chat seminars that are going to be coming up, because I think a lot of the things that came in earlier on were about the ability to the ability to do all this work, and do we have the people power and so on. Again, this is all stuff that's going to come up in the seminars that our wonderful trio are going to do. Our terrific trio. I wasn't going to use terrible. I wanted a bit of alliteration. So our terrific trio, and so they're going to be doing that. And obviously, a lot of the questions about how we interweave the live work with the live streaming work and the internet work with our in-person worship. That sort of, I think the term they've been using now has been hybrid. Has been very much a term that's been coined for that. A lot of this is all going to be discussed in the upcoming seminars. Am I right, gentlemen?
Yes.
Yeah, so there we are. So a lot of it there, and obviously everyone's just, again, very grateful for all the work that's been done. What I'd like to do at this point is perhaps could I ask Martin, if you are about, could I ask you to unmute for a moment, because I believe you wanted to say a wee thing just now.
Thanks, Jonathan. It's really just the trail, the next of these sessions. I don't mean by that the tech sessions, but more these events that are being put together just as we go forward. This has been absolutely brilliant today, but in some ways you might feel a bit bamboozled, and so much information, so many choices to make, and so much strategy to strategize about. And that's before they even got to talking about what you wear in front of the camera. I mean, do you go for the kind of ecclesial medallion man look? Well, of course, not all of you are lucky enough to have one of these. Or do you kind of want to hang out with the kids and go for the kind of hoodie look? So all these questions they never even touched on. So much to think about, and maybe that describes all of ministry right now. So much to think about. Well, here's the thing. On Monday, between 12 and 1, a session that is just for you to be ministered to. No seminar, no thinking, none of that, just to come and be ministered to. I'm going to host this session along with Carol Marples, who is a creative artist and spiritual guide. She's going to lead us through Psalm 22, very reflective session with artistic possibilities in that for you to respond. If you want to come to that, there'll be nothing asked of you other than that you be ready to receive. And isn't that maybe what we need just now in the mix of everything else? So 12 o'clock on Monday, same Zoom channel, myself and Carol Marples. If you want to respond creatively, have some pens or paint or anything like that creative ready at your disposal. If not, it's fine. You know, you can just sit back and receive totally. So thanks, Jonathan, for that wee opportunity to trail the next seminar. Thank you.
Problem. Thanks, Martin. And there, just another point, just had something in the chat from Murdo MacDonald. Murdo works for the Kirk's Science, Religion and Technology project, which seeks to help the church to engage with ethical issues in science and technology. And if you want to know more about that side of things, the details are in the chat with the website, www.artp.org.uk, or you can email him at mmacdonald, MAC Donald, and the usual Church of Scotland suffix for the email. Oh, Mardo's correct.
SRTP.
SRTP. I did wonder that. It didn't look like Science, Religion and Technology Project. As I say, the A and S, they're right beside one another on the keyboard. You're forgiven, Murdo, don't worry. Friends, thank you so much again for your presence here on behalf of the Ministers' Discussion Forum, and thank you again to Bryan, to Neil, to Jeremy and to John for their contributions today. And I'm sure that the conversation will not stop here, and please know that those of us who are in the Discussion Forum, if whatever we can do in the short term to signpost people and to assist, we're all here to support one another. And let's get on with, we can look forward to our preparations for Holy Week and Easter, whatever they may entail, be they in person, analogue or digital. But for now, let us perhaps draw today's gathering in prayer, and let's draw ourselves to our close before we go our separate ways just now. Let's pray together. Our gracious and loving God, thank you for bringing us all here together for this time of learning, of discussion, of creative discussion about what it means to go forward as a church technologically. Thank you for the insights of Neil, Jeremy, Bryan and John, as well as not just the people in the panel, but hearing one another's ideas, one another's views and one another's concerns in the chat as we've gone along. We're thankful for the fellowship and the friendship that we share, and we're thankful for the opportunities that lie ahead. As we approach 1 year for some people of doing online worship as a knee-jerk reaction, as an immediate reaction because of the very sudden closure of churches, we thank you for all of the things that we've learned in that time and the things that we are going to carry forward into the future. Be with us in our preparations, be with us in our planning, in our strategizing, and in all that lies ahead. And may everything, whatever we do, always be in accordance with your will and to further your kingdom, and for it to be to your glory and your glory alone. So as we go our separate ways today, we ask that you're with us in the days and weeks and months ahead, and we do all these things with the blessing of God Almighty, Father, Son and Holy Spirit. Together, perhaps we can unmute and perhaps we could all join in saying the grace to one another. The grace
of our Lord Jesus Christ,
the love of God,
the fellowship of the Holy Spirit,
evermore.
Amen.
Amen.